This is ABA On Call. I'm Rick Cabina, joined by my colleague and co-host Doug Kostowitz. If you work in behavior analysis, or you care how behavior actually unfolds in the real world, you're in the right place. Here, we take a clear look at the decisions, patterns, and assumptions that shape our field. No noise, no shortcuts, just a straightforward look at what matters and why. Let's jump into today's conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ABA On Call. Doug, how are you doing this fine day?
I am doing fine. I am ready for winter to be done, but it is not going out without a few extra flakes.
Yeah, as we're recording, we can both look out our respective windows and see snow, which for those people in areas that don't have snow, I'm jealous, but that's a story for another podcast.
It is what it is, right?
Yep. Well, we have a very cool episode today, and that is thinking about, you and I have both worked with parents for a big part of our careers.
Yep.
And many people in the audience also work with parents in some capacity. Even if they don't necessarily provide direct services to parents, they might be communicating with them about their child, or there's some way that they're likely interacting with them. And while we could spend a series of podcasts talking about all the important ways that behavior analysis can help parents, but we have come up with at least 3 conversations that behavior analysts can have with parents. And the first one is parents who have zero information about behavior analysis, when they hear about certain parts of it, like reinforcement, they confuse that with bribes. And the problems are that the parents might say, oh, I don't want to bribe my kid.
Yep.
And they think that what we're doing is just some clever trick that if you do this thing, that's going to make, and no parents want to bribe their kids. Or the parents will say things like, shouldn't they just listen to me? Why don't they listen? I'm the adult, that's the child. And another thing, I don't want to raise my kid and expect everything that they do. They think they're getting a reward or reinforcement. So there are these legitimate issues that parents bring up, and we need to have a conversation with them.
Yep.
So let's start this conversation out by you explaining what's the difference between reinforcement and bribery.
Well, first, I'm going to tell you, this is not limited to parents, but this is a huge selling point. I remember working with so many parents who said those exact words. I'm not going to give my kid for listening. They should be doing it anyway. Kind of funny to hear that conversation from teachers too, but we'll leave it to the parents right now. The first thing that they use is that word bribing. And I try very hard, and you better have an explanation for this, because you need to establish some credibility with that parent when you're trying to get across some of the techniques that you probably will end up sharing with them. So when I talk about bribes, I focus on what the definition of a bribe is. And I focus on, it's usually getting somebody to do something that may be bad for them or bad for someone else, is one way to think about it. But it's also giving it before the behavior needs to occur. Right? You know what? I want you to be really awesome in the store for me. Here's your cookie, eat it. Well, that's kind of fitting that bribing, right? And then the final thing is trying to give them something to stop something negative that they're doing already. So, oh, fine, stop yelling. Here's your cookie. Be good, be good, be good. It's that sense of giving it before they cease the behavior. So when we think about bribing, when we think about it comparing to reinforcement, there is a clear distinction between those things. And we don't want to be those to give that advice of getting to do something bad to them. Parents aren't usually doing that at all anyway, but giving it before the behavior, or getting to stop a behavior before it stops. So if you're hearing there, and I think one of the things that's going to come across here is timing is a major issue when we're thinking about the comparison between reinforcement and bribing.
Yeah. I think bribes can also happen after or during. Bribes, if we were going to list what the critical variables are, yes, before, but if you think about the Premick principle, that happens before also. And then if we're going to talk about those two things, that's even another way of looking at what do we mean by bribe. But I think one of the key issues with looking at bribes is, number one, the thing that you're picking uh, is likely, it might not even be a reinforcer. You don't know if it has any future power to make that behavior happen. Like you think it does, because you're, like you said, you're doing it in the moment. And hey, the kid is tantruming. If you stop right now, then I'm going to give you $1. That bribe has nothing to do with what we mean by positive reinforcement, which is that you have the just the whole way you break down positive reinforcement, that this thing that's occurring after the behavior is increasing the future probability of it. None of that is there with the bribe. And oftentimes these bribes, not only are they reactive, the outcome is the parent's going to have to keep bargaining. It's going to be very inconsistent. And it's just a terrible way to do business, because like the thing that we said earlier, where the parents go, I don't want to reward my kid for everything. What do you think's going to happen with bribing? Like you're going to have to bribe that kid constantly to make things happen. And just having a conversation with parents and trying to lay it down. I'm working on a way of communicating with parents where I'm not using reinforcement at all. I'm just using the words reward and relief. So these are things that Lindsley came up with. And parents, if you use these terms with reward, even though it's the same process of reinforcement, if you explain it in ways that they get, then that puts them on a very different footing from.
Yeah. So but there was something in there that I think needs to be keyed in on, is timing of things. Timing is very important. We understand that behavior analysis, the stuff that's packed up next to behavior in time, usually has the most effect on behavior when it follows it and sets the stage for it as well. But the notion of not doing it when kids are already engaged in some negative behavior, that is the wrong time to be dealing with providing those reinforcements, giving commands. That's the wrong time. When I worked with parents, we had two situations. So yeah, you want to provide attention, you want to provide nice things to happen when they do the things that you like, and you're tying those together in the terms of rewards. But also, you can set expectations in a very clear way and make those contingencies very clear. When you do this, this will happen. When you do this, that thing doesn't happen. And so, but that isn't done when they're upset. That's done when they're calm. And then you make sure that you have to let the contingencies speak for themselves. So you get that notion of bribing, you get that notion of reward. We push outside. The thing that I do want to remind you that you'll get is, why do I got to pay my kid? Why do I got to pay and the thing that I always say is, we don't go to work for fun. We work, and there are contingencies in place in real life. A real life thing is, I go to work. You can volunteer. That's great, but you may need some income to maintain whatever lifestyle that you have. And usually some job you have is going to pay. If you go to that job like, hey, we're not even going to tell you what you're going to earn, you wouldn't work there.
Right.
And if you don't get paid, you're not going to work there anymore either. So thinking that skill is not a good skill to impart on kids is problematic. Understand and being as realistic as possible too with our rewards, because you don't want to ever overpay for behavior. That sends you down a real bad slippery slope. You want to pay the least to get the most.
Yeah.
Right. If I worked an hour and I got paid $10 million, I'm going to work 1 hour and then I'm done. I'm never going to work again. But you get paid the least to get the most. And that teaches a really good skill of aligning these, what my behaviors earn in the home. And it also, it's difficult because usually we don't come into parents who are really calm, really understanding. There's problems already. I've quote unquote tried everything. So it is not an easy conversation, but knowing a few things to be able to combat them, it's, as they come up, can go a long way into implementing whatever your plan is, why you need to provide some edibles, why you need to tie together computer time to some task they need to do. It's not free range. So it's thinking about things as rewards, as you want to use that term, but understanding it may or may not function as a reinforcer. If it does, then tying it to the behaviors we want to see, withholding it at times when we don't want to pay for it.
Those are solid points. I want to add one more thing before we move on to our next section. Years ago, I was at FABA and I was listening to a presentation from Tim Vollmer, and he was talking about, it was a serious behavioral issue. And again, this is from years ago. I might be messing this story up, but this is what I remember, and this is what I tell myself. I remember him talking about being in an IEP or a meeting and the parents objecting to the way they were giving attention. And his point is, look, this kid's going to get it one way or another. So you can willingly give it to them and control that process, or you could keep doing this stuff that you're doing over here, which is leading to the issues. Like, this is what behavior is. It's very adaptive. And that's the way you need to share that with parents. Like, all of us are reinforcement machines. Everyone listening to this, all of our kids,
Sure.
that's how we live life. That is creatures. That's how we behave. And to think that somehow conflating that with, oh, this is somehow sleazy, or, oh, why should they do it? You're doing it already. You just don't know that you're doing it.
Right.
And that's a way, if you can communicate that effectively, that can help parents feel
Yep.
much comfortable with reinforcement. Okay, let's go into another section.
Okay. I'll introduce this one because this is a topic, and I'm giving you another teaser. At some point, we're going to be taking this conversation for the whole book when we do Sidman's book. But this is something that is I really hold near and dear in getting across to parents and teachers, but parents especially. Why does yelling work, and why does it fail often in the end? That's the hardest thing to get across to someone, because invariably you're going to go into a home, you're going to perhaps do some observations, you're going to see the yelling, you're going to see the coercion, and you're going to see these effects on parent behavior, and they're going to say, yeah, but it worked. Yeah, but the kid sat down. Yeah, but the kid stopped doing. How do you get across to them that that is actually not a good thing?
This is a challenge because, as you correctly pointed out, yelling works. However, what parents don't understand is yelling, punishment in general. This is what we're talking about. Yelling is punishment. It's type 1 punishment. It's positive punishment. However you want, whatever you want to call that. Punishment, one of the problems with it is the kids tend to habituate to it, and then you have to escalate punishment. So the yelling becomes louder yelling. The yelling becomes threats. The yelling becomes screaming. And if that tops out and the kid's like, oh, okay, here's mom or dad going off again, what's above that?
Force.
Yeah, it's force. And this is going to happen all the time. We know this through thousands and thousands of studies of looking at punishment. This will happen with children. And It's sad to see it, but that punishment will definitely habituate. The kids will no longer respond to it. What do you do then?
It's
And
not just that. Add even one more. It's also negative reinforcement because you can yell at a kid to stop something and you yell until they stop and then they stop and you get reinforced and the kid gets reinforced for terminating the adverse stimulus of
yeah,
screaming at them. This becomes very much a coercive cycle. And it's not just that the parents have to yell more and more. You get predictable side effects from the kids. And this is what as a behavior analyst, you can let them know what are these outcomes. You got kids who can counter control, right? You get kids who now will avoid an escape because they don't want to be punished or don't want to be yelled at. They will learn to do that. You'll see an older kid start to coerce and yell at a younger kid because that's what they're seeing. That's the role model. So I'm always thinking about how can I sell to these parents to stop doing that. One of my techniques, and this is in combination with the reinforcement, is I always say, why are you letting that kid take all that attention from you for this stuff that perhaps isn't that meaningless?
mm,
Why are you investing in that? Don't let them control your attention. Use it at the time you want to use it. Don't use it now. And I always remind them, I say, you can lose today's battle, but still win a war by understanding what happened today. So your kid doesn't make his bed today. It's okay. Figure out what goes on and try to figure out and work that process for the next day. We are busy. We are stressed. We have a lot of things going on in our lives. And I feel like I'm talking to a parent right now. I've
you
had so
are.
many of these
I am a
conversations.
parent. Thank
Yes, I
you.
know, but you're perfect. So I don't have to worry about you. But
It's
the
all
idea
thanks.
is this letting them know the outcomes, letting them know the potential side effects, and letting them know that, you know what, don't let that kid win by you yelling at them. They want to get you. So it's trying to set that stage of because you're not there all the time. And you want to get across them that the yelling is not going to produce anything because come off strong. You know that they're going to yell every once in a while, but you need to make those other outcomes be more reinforcing so they start getting picked up by that parent when you're not around.
Mhm. It's a hard cycle to break. Parents that have a habit of yelling, and then you're going to come in there and say to them, "Oh, I'm this expert on behavior, and this is why it's that." Even when you provide that information, you need to do more. You need to give parents a explicit strategy. So what you were describing is if you could break it down and say, just try this one thing
Yep.
and see how it works. Focus in on it. That's the way you change behavior. It's we started off saying yelling works, and parents can be very skeptical, but we want to have a relationship, a positive relationship with our children. Yelling doesn't get you there. And that's
Nope.
another way that you can appeal to parents that providing the rationale is one thing, giving skills is another thing,
Yeah.
and doing them together is likely a way that you might get some buy-in and you might get the parent to start trying something different.
Yeah, we used to do a lot when we were working when I was working down in Florida and working with foster parents and biological parents with a group there in Tampa. And we had to teach them specific step-by-step tools because and they had to demonstrate those tools, they give feedback. It is not an easy sell to even, you know, pay more attention to the stuff you want. Ignore that minor stuff you don't want. And that starts to get you in the habit of reinvesting your attention into other things that you'd like to see. Because invariably, what happens is exactly what you say. And that is, I've yelled, I need to yell more. And then I hit my kid. And that is why people would come to my parenting class because they had their kids removed because of abuse, neglect. And
Yeah.
so you have to teach them other skills. They don't know what to do when they going there. So, you know, I mean it is difficult, but you have to be ready to have that conversation.
Yeah. I know we're talking about parents here, but I am and you tease that this applies to everyone in teachers. And I will just say, when I was doing this was years ago, when I was working on my credential, I remember being in a school. I did this in Columbus, and there was a teacher that worked with kindergarten kids. And this is no joke, Doug. This teacher would scream at the kids, the entire class.
Hmm.
And to this day, my heart breaks for every single kid that went through this teacher's classroom, because this teacher's thought was scream, yell, show force, dominate. And oh my God, these poor kids. It's very heartbreaking to think about what that does to young children, and anything we can do when we're working with parents to help them get off that track is going to pay huge dividends for the life of the children that are working with them. It's
I'll, gi-
really
I'll
important.
give I'll give you about one feedback. I always tell my teachers, because I tell them this information, this notion of coercion. I always talk about it as, you need to think about it like emotional plaque, right? You don't get a cavity today, but over time, it's going to build up, and then you're going to start to see all these effects. And you can't just brush it off with one positive. You have to be able
Yeah.
to work on that over a long period of time, because you don't know how many times this kid's been yelled at before you walked in. You're just
Oh, wow.
you're the tip of the iceberg. So those are having these techniques and trying to keep it back to having these techniques to talk to parents is imperative. You can't go in and say, here's your behavior plan. Pay attention to positives, ignore negatives, do this. They're not going to buy into it.
No
They're
way.
not going to understand it. And you have to be able to talk to them about this in a very clear language and understanding.
Yeah.
So,
Even empathizing with them.
it sounds like you're teasing number 3.
What is number 3, Doug?
Oh, come on. I wasn't ready for that. All right. What's number 3? Teenagers aren't broken. They're reinforced. Tell me more, Rick.
We just had a nice long conversation about yelling. That whole calculus changes when the kid's bigger and stronger than you and they're teenagers, and they can just say F you and walk away, and just the behaviors are completely different. And teenagers, again, it's all behavior, but the children that parents have, they don't stay babies ever. And they turn into these teenagers with these these hormones and these decisions and all the stuff that's going on, all of these motivating operations that are happening, and understanding that these kids that you're working with, that were the babies that you're helping shepherd into adulthood, they aren't broken. They have learned ways to do specific behaviors. And that all gets down to reinforcement history.
Exactly. You know what? If this worked, teenagers would do this. Get ready to go to school. No, mama, I would not like to go to school. Okay, then you stay home. Well,
Right.
guess what? That kid will never yell at you. That kid will never do anything, because that doesn't work. So then they go, Mother Vegas, they're screaming, whatever. Boom. That worked. So now I don't need to do the other thing. I just need to do this thing. So yeah, whatever they're doing, there is something maintaining it, right? If we're doing it more, or we're consistently doing it, reinforcement is in effect. So understanding that and conveying that to a parent and being like, hey, there's something happening. It could have nothing to do with you. It could have everything to do to you. You think about a kid who grew up in a yelling house. Well, guess what? I'm 6', 250. You want to yell at me? I can do counter control. I can
Yep.
do ignoring. I can do avoidance. I can do a whole bunch of different things. I can just laugh in your face, like you said. And it's like, I can't do anything with them. They're broken. No, they've been shaped. They've learned to do this. What are we going to do now? So what are we going to do now, Rick?
That's a good question. All of this is always going to be contextual.
Hmm.
Why has the behavior shaped up? Parents, they're think you successfully have raised a child who's now in college. I have done this,
Successfully. Okay.
and though being a human, and no matter how well you understand behavior analysis, you are going to be part of. It's like physicists can't escape gravity. Behavior
Right.
analysts cannot escape the social dance that happens with their kids. You are going to respond just, I get this sometimes where people are like, oh, you're a behavior analyst. What are you thinking? And people have this thought that, oh, you're thinking about these things and you respond. No one can do that. Like maybe you have some kind of strategy, but when someone does something, you're just going to respond as you have been reinforced yourself and whatever is your history. And it's the same thing with parents. So as you think back on, when have your kids ever been disrespectful to you? And if you ever ask that to parents and parents say no, they are lying, because part of kids growing up is trying to understand this crazy social world and all the rules and the norms, and they do things that are disrespectful, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally. And even using those words, it's all being shaped up by the contingencies. And
Exactly.
the children who are disrespectful, and that's something that really grinds the gears of the parents, explaining to them, look, they're not being disrespectful. They are operating under these contingencies and shaping, using a different word again. You and I and everyone listening to us gets contingencies, but wow, you throw that parent around, or you that word around parents, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah.
Explaining that and even diagramming that and helping first start off that rational way of looking at it, that's one way you can start that conversation.
Second way is I tell my teachers and I tell my parents Q-tip. Q-tip. Quit taking it personally.
Beautiful.
Do not get your emotions tied into it. If they're yelling at you, it's fine. Listen, right? That's something we don't usually. We want business, we have agenda, and we just like clean your room, do this, and then boom, when they don't, it's an argument. It's always think about the kinds of questions you ask. My kid never talks to me. Would you ever ask an open-ended positive question? Are you always asking the did yous? Are you asking
Right.
why questions that are constantly putting them on the defensive? Ask open-ended questions. Use empathy. You don't have to agree with kids when you see, hey, it seems like you're really upset. I don't believe you should be upset, but it seems like you're really upset. And you'd be surprised. When kids talk, we are not very good back, right? We usually don't listen. We have business. We don't just spend a few moments listening to them, giving some empathy, open-ended positive questions. We usually got agendas. We also got to get crap done. We've got to get things done.
Doug, did you make up that term Q-tip? How have I never heard this in my entire life? I love
Well,
it. I
I'm
love
not sure. The group we were at, we used that when we were teaching tools about ignoring junk behavior down in Florida. And a way to get really parents into that was like, don't take this stuff personally. You can ignore when somebody's yelling at you. Sticks and stones, right? May break
Yeah,
your bones, but words aren't going to hurt you. So, you know, we used to say things like, never let them see you sweat, Q-tip, all that kind of stuff, just to get across to them that I don't need to respond to every negative minor, swearing at me, disrespectful, clicking, all the stuff that annoys and gets under our skin. If you cannot take it personally, you're less likely to provide attention, which then readies you to attend to appropriate behavior. You start to manipulate in the environment what actually earns that. So there, was that enough of a explanation?
that's great. Wrapping up this section, it's important when you have these conversations with parents to say, look, If you're working with a teenager, maybe you've engaged in this pattern your entire life. It's never too late to change. There's
Yeah.
always time when you can turn things around, and other basic comments to prepare them. They don't understand extinction. They don't understand extinction bursts. There's so much you can have with just basic conversation, but leading with empathy and helping them understand, yes, we have these principles. Here are some things you can do. And anything like that Q-tip that you can give parents that they will remember. Oh, okay. That's going to help them.
Yeah, it's not easy, and usually the other thing you got going in is, we're not the when I was doing it, I was a little bit younger. I didn't have kids.
Yeah.
That's so you're gonna have to be ready for dealing with that too. When you go in, it's like, hey, how are you telling me to do this when you don't have any kids? So,
Right.
I mean, I had my ways of saying it. I used to say you don't go to doctors that have cancer to treat cancer.
Nice.
You doctors,
That's right.
doctors they have a specific training. Your training is in dealing with behavior. You're not going in there to tell them how to change a diaper. You're going in there to look at the roles of these interactions, look at obviously not use these terms, but you're looking at those contingencies to see what's maintaining problem behavior, etc. So it's not an easy job, but the more you know that you can kind of speak in just lay terms, but understand that you're trying to sell that technique. That's the critical aspect.
Doug, you are a fount of wisdom.
Well,
I have
thank you.
enjoyed all of your comments here.
Well, I appreciate it.
With that, we would like to thank you all for joining us on ABA On Call. You've been listening to ABA On Call. Conversations like this keep our field moving, and we're glad to have you with us. If you're completing the CEU, take a moment to finish the quiz. Until our next episode, keep looking closely and thinking critically.